got to be a millionaire or some kind of petty bourgeoisie anytime you're living here in this country. You got to be in skullduggery, making you money illicitly to live like somebody in this country. It's outrageous and insane, them crazy prices in Port of Spain. And like the merchants going out their brain, and the working man like the only toiling in vain. Where you ever hear a television for 7,000, $250,000 for a piece of land? A pair of sneakers, $200, 80, 90,000 for motor cars. At last, here in Trinidad, we see capitalism gone mad. It's sad and getting more bad because capitalism gone mad. To provide for your family today on your present salary is an impossibility in this country. So many bills to pay, there is no conceivable way to save for a rainy day in this country. Avariciousness, to be precise, is why every damn thing so overpriced. Big business making everybody feel government give them an open license to steal. Would you believe me? One night of panty is $19.90, $20 for some baby milk. The cheapest jersey costs over 60, 200 and change a yard for silk. It's hard here in Trinidad. Lord have mercy, capitalism gone mad. It's sad, things getting more bad. Oh Lord, capitalism gone mad. To buy a pack of cigarette just leave you with a hole in your wallet, and money is so hard to get in this country. Necessity or luxury, it doesn't matter what the item is, they're charging anything they please in this country. Primary school books prices loot, it's highway robbery, the price of food. All hopes and dreams elude the poor man, but politicians still expect good work attitude. Just imagine this, the cheapest coffee, over 3,000, not even dying today easy. Thousands of dollars for the undertaker, so you could get a spot in the cemetery. It hard here in Trinidad. Oh Lord, capitalism gone mad. The gladness that once we had is gone because capitalism gone mad.
Stop using your home internet.
Oh yes, oh yes, the mighty sparrow, the mighty sparrow. Capitalism gone mad. Sparrow did that calypso in 1980. In the middle of the recession of that year. Our guest wasn't born yet at that time. Capturing the essence of the time. And it's as if he's singing about today in Guyana. Capitalism gone mad. The mighty sparrow. Slinger Francisco, the greatest of them all, singing about capitalism gone mad. Prices high in the market. Money not there. Money not there. Money not there. If you're a worker and you're on a fixed wage, the only way to deal with the high prices is more money in your pocket. More money in your pocket. And if you're poor and you want to get out of poverty, the way to start is more money in your pocket. More money in your pocket. Good evening to all of you, and welcome to Politics 101 on Wednesday evening. Wednesday evening. Glad to have you on because we are living in interesting times. Interesting times. But we're going to make it. We're going to make it through because we are human beings too. We are going to make it through. We are going to make it through. Welcome to Politics 101. Wherever you're joining us from, whether you're joining us from in Guyana or you're joining us from outside of Guyana, North America, welcome. Our Caribbean, welcome to Politics 101. And those of you joining us from Europe, especially the old mother country, welcome. Good night, and welcome to Politics 101. Good evening to you in Linden. Good evening. If you are a public servant, well, we're going to be talking about that. I have young Elson Lowe on tonight. He's been missing in action for a little bit, but he's here tonight to walk us through this wage package that the government has given to the teachers. There we go, teachers, public servants. Please share the link. Please share the link and let everyone know that we're on tonight. Let everyone know we're on tonight. The Attorney General, I noticed today, has said that the magistrate's court has no jurisdiction over someone leaving the country. He's saying the magistrate court was wrong to grant Calvin Buttus's wife permission to leave the country. He's saying the court does not have jurisdiction. Well, if the court doesn't have jurisdiction, then who has jurisdiction? Where do you go to apply if you need permission to leave the country you're on a charge? You go to the Attorney General? I don't think so. You go to the President and the Vice President? I don't think so. But as usual, Nandlal and them think they're God. We come on air tonight with some good news for some of you. Some good news for some of you. Some good news for some of you. As you would notice on the screen, there, the headline, PNCR WPA set to discuss coalescing for the 2025 election. I think a lot of you have been calling for this kind of move, and we are glad to report that earlier today, a delegation led by the PNC leader and a delegation led by the WPA leader met, and was a fruitful meeting. And the outcome of the meeting is that the two parties will begin discussion towards contesting the election as a coalition. We have said in the statement that was issued to the press that while we will begin discussions towards a coalition, other parties that wish to join the coalition could do so. So that's some good news for those of you who have been calling on us, the leaders of the opposition, to unite as we want to make sure that we give ourselves the best chance of removing the PPP from office. So good news for those of you. Good news for those of you. Good news for those of you who have been calling upon us to move in that direction. And we have heard your cries, your concerns, and we have moved in that direction. We have moved in that direction. We're hoping that as the discussions expand, that other parties will join. Let me quickly read the statement for you here. Amidst calls by opposition supporters for a show of unity among opposition parties as the country prepares for the upcoming national and regional elections, the leaderships of the PNC and WPA today met in the first of a series of planned meetings. In a frank discussion, the two parties exchanged views on the current political situation, including the need to ensure that the coming elections are conducted in a manner that enjoys the confidence of all parties. Towards this end, it was agreed that the work started by the joint opposition parties, that is the PNC, AFC, and the WPA, should be intensified. The parties also engaged in a discussion of the strengths and weaknesses of the APNU AFC coalition, both in and out of office, and committed themselves to correcting the flaws identified. Some of the issues discussed include the role of small parties in coalition decision-making, the need for a joint integrated platform, mechanisms to mitigate conflicts within the coalition, and for the constituent parties to act in unison if must they retain their independence. The possibility of the WPA returning to the APNU was also discussed. In the end, it was agreed that despite mistakes, coalition politics remains a better option for Guyana. Against that background, the two parties decided in principle to work jointly at two levels. First, it was agreed that the work of the joint opposition parties should be broadened to include other forms of political engagement. Second, the parties agreed to begin discussions towards the formation of a coalition to contest the upcoming elections, but to leave the door open for other parties which may wish to join. A second meeting was scheduled before the commencement of the Christmas holidays. The PNC delegation was led by party leader Aubrey Norton and included General Secretary Sherwin Benjamin and Chairman Sherwin Older. The WPA delegation was led by co-leader Dr. David Hines and included co-leaders Takumo Ogunse and Rohit Kanai and party chairman Dion Abrams. End of statement. So there we have it. There we have it. We have heard your calls, we have heard your pleas, and we have acted. We meet again before the holidays, that is within another week or so, and to begin this process. Tonight, we want to shine the light on the wage package for public servants that was announced by the government yesterday. We have Elson Lowe, who is the economic advisor to the leader of the opposition, and he will help us break down what this is all about. Good evening, Brother Elson.
Good evening, good evening. How are you tonight?
Well, I'm feeling upbeat, as you would have heard there. The WP and the PNC met today and agreed to begin talks for a coalition. And as is known, I am a coalition man. I'm a coalition person. So I am excited at that news. Any preliminary thoughts on that development?
Yes, I think it is very important for us to present a unified front going forward. I think that I can say as the treasurer of the PNCR, I look forward to working along with members of the WPA as we discuss many of these really critical issues. And I think that when it comes to some of the more left-leaning, socially friendly policies, I think the WPA has been able to put forward some ideas that are very useful in terms of fighting poverty and helping to improve people's livelihood and develop the country. So I'm looking forward to that form of engagement. And I think that going forward, we'll be able to do a lot in terms of getting the country on the right track.
Thank you very much for those sentiments. It's good to hear young people like yourself embrace that broad view of how we move Guyana forward. We are a diverse society, diverse ethnically, diverse ideologically, diverse socially. And so therefore, it is imperative that we put forward a diverse platform and have a diverse governance system so that we are able to draw on the strengths that each party and each group brings to the table. Brother, this wage package that was announced yesterday by the government, the first thing we noted is that the union said the package was a result of discussions between the government and the union, which of course is a break with previous behavior where the government imposed wage increases without the union. The only caveat there is that the package that has been given to the public servants is almost identical to the package that was given to the teachers. In a sense, the government had made it very clear that they were not going to offer more than 10%. And so therefore, one is hard-pressed to think that there was any bargaining. There might have been meetings, but from my standpoint, that does not look very much like bargaining. Your thoughts?
I completely understand where you're coming from. And what I would say is this is an environment in which unions are not as empowered and engaged with in a consistent way to improve the performance and to improve the lives of public servants and to improve their role within Guyana's development. Rather, unions are kind of it's an engagement that you have to enter in just because you're forced to. It's not necessarily a continuous engagement, a continuous constructive engagement. And what I would say is I think maybe the emphasis shouldn't be so much on the unions, but rather a government doesn't have to only offer what it is that unions will settle for. A government can offer what it is that it believes that public servants deserve and what it is that it believes will help to develop the country with the right incentives for public servants. One, for them to stay, and two, for them to perform at their best and be comfortable in their jobs. So I think we should move away too much from focusing on the unions, but rather focus on what it is that the government could have offered, what it is the government is willing to offer, and why it is that they're not willing to do that. That's the first thing I'll say. The second thing I'll say is, and this I think has surprised a lot of people, and it particularly disappointed me, is that the agreement is not a 1-year agreement, but a 2-year agreement. 10% this year and 8% next year. Why that is especially concerning is that the country continues to grow, and we continue to see additional oil production and additional FPSOs, that is to say the ships that produce the oil, come on stream. And so next year there is anticipated an additional FPSO which will come on stream, and which will then cause Guyana, once it is begins pumping oil, to become the country with the highest per capita production of oil. That is to say, a barrel of oil per person, or more than 1 barrel of oil per person in the highest in the entire world, and I think the highest per capita exporter. What that means is that not only are we looking at 10%, which is to me unacceptable, we're looking at 8%, which would be unacceptable today, and is even more unacceptable in the context of next year. That says to me that public servants really have gotten the wrong end of the stick here, and that it is disappointing that this is the direction that things have gone. Now, we must therefore reflect on what it is that the PUP really has in mind when it comes to public servants, what direction of travel we're looking at under the PUP when it comes to public servants. What I think especially was distressing on top of these low numbers was that we saw income tax in this country increase, in part due, this year, in part due to oil workers and so on, increased by nearly 22%. So you had a very sharp increase in income tax. The government is getting a lot of tax revenue from that. But at the same time, the increase is half of that, not even half of that. And so that is it gives an indication that even when it comes to their quote-unquote measures of fiscal sustainability, they don't want to pay public servants based on anything other than tax revenue. Even then, by some measures, they're falling back and they're paying much less than the increased tax revenue. One of the ways that we've said that the government can provide benefits to Guyanese, of course, public servants included in this category, is by increasing the tax-free threshold to $400,000 and simplifying the tax code so that you're only charged tax on your money above $400,000. That could easily have been implemented. But this is not a government that is kind. This is not a government that is thinking within some sort of structure. Rather, it's a government that is just looking to see what is the minimum they can get away with. That's really their thinking. It's clear that that's their thinking. What is the minimum we can get away with? Because in this context, put it another way, it's not just about the union looking at next year. The government knows that next year, Guyana will have 900,000 barrels of oil per day of production once the additional vessel is online. And then the following year, there'll be another vessel that is due to come online. The government knows this. And yet, knowing that we're going to see a sharp increase in overall revenue next year, oil revenue, government is still offering less next year than this year. That to me just shows that I think we have to abandon the idea that the PUP is engaged in A, bargaining, and B, any kind of constructive pay structure. Rather, this is a hard political calculation. What is the minimum we can pay without facing severe repercussions?
Elson Lowe, the economic advisor to the leader of the opposition. Welcome to all of you who are just joining us. As we said at the beginning of the program, there was a meeting today between the leadership of the WPA and the PNC, and the parties has agreed to begin discussion towards the formation of a coalition to contest the upcoming elections together. Good evening to you all. I see Egerton David, the man Sevens, who's a popular PNC member. Egerton, I met one of your brothers this past weekend, I traveled to Ohio for my aunt's funeral, and he was there, and he introduced himself to me and said, "I am Seven's brother." I didn't ask whether he's the big brother, the little brother, but we had a good chat, and I told him to tell you that that we met. Quite. He's more handsome than you, Sevens. Elson, the PNC put out a statement today in which it said it described the package as highway robbery. Tell us why you characterized it that way.
Well, one of the core issues that we've spoken about before and that we are addressing directly in this particular press statement is these across the board increases result in very high pay increases for those at the higher level of the income scale and very low pay increases for the lower end of the income scale. And they're the opposite of the practice that we engaged in when we were in office, where we would provide higher increases to those at the lower end and lower increases to those at the top end. Our reasoning, of course, was that those at the lower end need the additional monies in order to make ends meet. The PUP's reasoning seems to be that it is a mechanism to reward those at the very top. So ministers who are earning $1 million and plus are getting massive pay packages. The president, who's earning nearly $3 million, is getting a monstrous pay package himself. $3 million a month. He's getting a monstrous pay package himself. And so he's going to get this Christmas, between his existing salary and his pay package, over $6 million in one go. Over $6 million, and that's tax-free as well. On the other hand, ministers are getting millions this particular Christmas. In fact, what you're looking at is a situation where the level 1 public servant, this is your entry-level public servant, their entire year's pay is roughly equivalent to what a minister is going to get in this December just from their retro and so on. An entire year's worth of effort. And the minister's walking away with that in one paycheck. It is absurd. It is cruel. And it reflects a morality from the PUP that is ugly. They don't seem to understand or to care about the struggle of lower income people, and public servants is an example. So you're giving an entire year's essentially bonus to ministers and to the president, and lower income public servants are barely getting a little $120,000 as opposed to these millions.
And so let's break that down, because I think it's important. We in the WPA have taken the position that this across the board wage increase, salary increase, is really, as you are pointing out, counterproductive for those at the lower end of the pay scale. The minimum wage is what, $86,000 and something. And so if you have a public servant who is earning, let's say, $100,000, 10% of $100,000 is $10,000, and then you tax that, so they're taking home at the end of the month less than $10,000. And then you have somebody who, like the president, who apparently is earning close to $3 million. 10% of $3 million is what, $300,000. All right? So
yes.
This package for the regular public servant, and most of the public servants fall in the lower brackets. All right? They will be taking home between $8,000 to about $15,000 extra per month, while the president is taking home $300,000 extra. Put another way, all right? The worker that is taking home 10% extra, the president is taking home 30 times extra from this package. And so therefore, the idea of this across the board increase is prejudicial and is discriminatory towards poor people, towards public servants and workers at the lower end. Your comment.
Yeah, absolutely. That gets, I think, really the heart of the question of what's the rationale behind these across the board increases if they result in such severe inequalities. Why are they doing this? Other than the best response really is just to enrich themselves, their close friends, families, and favorites of those within the PPP. There isn't to me. Even if you're saying that you think that you want to compensate people based on the idea that they have qualifications and degrees, they mentioned that they want to, that they're giving people doctorates and masters and so on, some additional compensation. So why the need to do this across the board retro if you're already compensating people in a different way? And also, it must not be lost on them that their salaries, as a result of these constant across the board increases, are accumulating to become all sorts of absurd figures. When you look at the president's salary, the presidential salary, I think in like 2011, or you're looking at 1.3 million or so was his salary in those days, and now you're getting up to the $3 million mark, which is the question is that salary necessary in this context? I don't see it as being necessary.
Yeah, and you're right. Let me just come in here because I want you to I want you to zero in a little bit more on what the workers are taking home. Now, if, for example, you had said, look, we are going to give a 5% increase to those at the top. So the president, 5% increase. But to those at the bottom, you're going to give a 30% increase. At a minimum.
Well, there are years.
Increase would mean
there are years when we gave 0.5 and 1% increase to those in the highest salary scales.
Yes.
And then, we will give 20% increases and other large increases to those at the lower end. It isn't set in stone that you have to give those at the top end a large increase. That doesn't have to be, and especially if you're compensating them in other ways for qualifications. Now, when you look at it on a micro level, as you're saying, with the lower income public servants, $120,000 after an entire year's labor in this environment is a drop in the bucket. It's barely enough to decorate your Christmas tree and keep things a little bit merry in the house, if you get me. And so as a result, it comes off as extremely callous. Now, the other side of this is the government has not reckoned with the cost of living crisis. You've got inflation again this year, 3%, and we believe it is higher than that. Food inflation, I believe, was on track to be around 7% this year. That's very significant price increases again, and anyone who shops in the market will tell you about how significant these price increases have been. Now, that's one half of the discussion. The other half of it is if you're giving a 10% and the inflation is 3%, it's really a 7%, isn't it?
7%, yes.
Effectively, right? And so in an environment where the national budget is $1.2 trillion, a massive national budget, where that national budget is equivalent to all of the budgets that were passed under the coalition, you're looking at 77% increase for those at the lower end of the income scale across our time in office. And for the same amount of money, a similar size budget, when you add up these budgets, these folks are giving you 10%.
10%.
1/7 of what we did. We were compensating 7 times as much. I mean, what in God's name? And that compensation was prior to having oil revenues. Now you've got oil revenues.
Yes.
So not only are they compensating people at a rate 1/7 to rate 7 times less than we were compensating people, there's much more fiscal space to compensate people.
Elson, I want you to keep on the cost of living, especially as it relates to food, the food prices. Now, if you are giving people a raise of, let's say the worker who is earning 120,000 So 10% is 12,000. By the time you tax that and you control for inflation, you're taking home much less than $10,000 per month. But as an economist, you know that once the government announces we are giving a raise to workers, the market responds. And prices for food, prices for other goods and services are going to go up in anticipation of people getting a raise. And in most cases, you will find that the rates of increase in prices for goods and food and so on far exceed the little raise that the public servant is carrying home. And so, in effect, from where I am seeing it, is that with this raise, the worker is able to buy less on the market than if there was not a raise. Because if there was not a raise, the prices are at a certain level.
Let me be specific on it because there's a couple of key items there.
Good.
One is that I believe in their second year of office, they actually gave a raise that was lower than the rate of inflation, so workers could buy less immediately.
Yes.
The second thing is their management of the economy when it comes to containing prices has come under a lot of scrutiny because we must remember that Guyana is earning more money due to the high oil price. And so as the cost of living has gone up, the country's revenue has also significantly surpassed expectations. So there was a lot of space, fiscal space, capacity for us to be able to deal with this inflation. Now, one key measure, and there's more than one way that we need to talk about this, but one key measure has been that cash grant, which we have advocated for 2 years, and they finally have capitulated and provided the cash grant to Guyanese. But the $60 billion is not out of thin air that the $60 billion came. It is rather as a result of the high oil price due to the war in Ukraine. And so we identified early on that these were surplus monies, unexpected windfall monies, and that given that the cost of living had increased, that should be provided to Guyanese to compensate for this high cost of living. But rather than giving it out when it is that we generated it so that people could benefit over the course of the last couple of years, I mean, the war in Ukraine is a couple of years now, they have decided to hold it back, let Guyanese punish throughout the cost of living crisis for all this time, and then at the last minute give it. And then when they give it, it's utter chaos. Well, and we can go into that. The second thing I want to say, though, is this. The PUP likes to make this argument that if you give public servants a salary increase, it's going to cause inflation. It's going to overwhelm the economy. You can't put so much money into the economy. And yet here they are, putting $60 billion in a cash grant into the economy as if there's no problem. It is not that the PPP has ever actually genuinely thought that you can't give public servants an increase. This is just them using that as an excuse, using inflation as an excuse. That's the first thing. The second thing is, we have advanced a long list of measures to help to deal with the inflation crisis, to deal with the cost of living crisis. So if they had followed many of those measures, the first measure, of course, was the cash grant. Well, we talked about increasing agricultural production. We talked about lowering the cost of transportation from the farm to the market. We talked about helping farmers to buy equipment so that they can lower their cost of production by being more efficient. We've had a long list of measures outlined. That has not been their approach. Even managing the exchange rate better, that would have helped as well. You can't get foreign currency, and so as a result, they have to buy from the black market, and that's more expensive. They've not managed that well. So as a result, you've had a prolonged and painful cost of living crisis. And so they've been saying, on the one hand, that they can't provide increases, and on the other hand, mismanaging the cost of living crisis. So we've been trapped in the worst of all worlds. That is to say, low levels of increases, not much being paid out, while also a cost of living crisis that has been allowed to get out of hand. And so it is tragic. And this $100,000 cash grant is kind of too little, too late. People have already been punishing for years under this crisis, when they should have given the cash grant out when we first said that they should give it out, which is a couple of years ago.
Elson Lowe, economic advisor to the leader of the opposition here tonight, and we are talking about the wage package that the government has offered to the public servants, 10% this year and 9% next year. And we are opening it up so that we can see where the package, in effect, is making the public servants worse off than they were before the package. For those of you who are joining us a little bit late, we have some positive news. The WPA and PNC met today and agreed to begin talks towards contesting the election as a coalition. The two parties met today and they agreed to begin talks towards the formation of a coalition for the upcoming election. A second meeting is planned before the Christmas holidays to get the program on the road. And as I said at the beginning, this is in direct response to the concerns that many of you here on this program, on other programs, and opposition supporters across Guyana and outside of Guyana have been calling for. That the feeling is that we stand a better chance of defeating the PPP if we go to the elections together. We have heard your concerns and we have responded to them. I think it's some positive news, some good news as we go forward into the holidays. Elson, your party, the PNC, has said that, and you'll give me the direct figure here, that at a minimum, workers should be earning, I think, $250,000. Is that the correct figure?
Yeah, well, what we have indicated is that, first of all, no Guyanese should be earning less than, well, it depends a bit on the size of your household and so on, because obviously those with larger households would need to have higher incomes. So we've talked about $250,000 as one of the baseline figures that we're looking at. But also we've remarked that this one-off cash grant that PPP has done to us is as a result of them not only not listening to good sense, but not managing the country's finances efficiently. And so we believe that, quite apart from just the earnings that people will have due to jobs and so on, that a cash grant of $100,000 and more is affordable every year once we are focused on efficiency and stamping out corruption. And so we call that the good governance dividend. That is to say, the savings from good governance can fund very significant annual cash grants to Guyanese. Now, I know Guyanese may say, well, you know, what is this cash grant figure? What does this make sense to me? This idea of a good governance number, what does that really mean? Well, I'll give you a concrete example. We're looking right now at yet another power ship that has come to Guyana to help to deal with the blackout crisis. And earlier this year, when we got the first power ship, we said, and of course it's there in the media, that the government needs to get an additional amount of megawatts, an additional, I think it's 50 megawatts, we had said, to provide a buffer because the country's energy needs are growing and it is clearly proven difficult for them to keep track of and to make use of the existing energy generation. It's not enough. Now, if they had followed what we had said, and gotten generation in then, which could have been installed and up and ready by now, they wouldn't have had to take an emergency measure to go and get this power ship for twice the price, costing 50 to 60 million US more than if they had listened to us all the way back in February. So that means that, quite simply, just by governing the country well, you'd have saved 50 to 60 million dollars, which is roughly half of the cost of the ship itself. And of course, that could have now been used for a cash grant. And so there is a real tangible cost to Guyanese of the PUP's incompetence a tangible cost. That is to say, because they waste money, because they're corrupt, the result is that there's always going to be significant amounts of money that can be provided directly to Guyanese. And we believe that, given IMF estimates and given some of our own estimates, that is as much as 50% of the capital budget of this country is waste and corruption. So we therefore will look closely at this, hire international experts, conduct evaluations, improve management processes, reform procurement, and as a result, what it is the PPP builds with a $1.1 trillion budget, we can build with a $500 billion budget. We can do far, far more because we're not going to be squandering the money. We'll be managing it much more efficiently. And to me, that is something we want Guyanese to understand in this environment. If we continue like this, it's just going to be more of the same on the PvP, and you're not going to get your what you really are due.
So, Elson, and I know you have another appointment, and I want to get in a couple of other questions. The PPP is touting the allowances as a bonus, a more than a top up on the wages. And I just want to make a couple of observations as you comment on these allowances. One is that some of the allowances are taxed. And secondly, that allowances do not count when it comes to your pension. So that you may get a couple more dollars now, but when you retire, it doesn't influence or impact your pension. Speak to this allowance as a kind of 3-card trick that is playing.
Well, one of the first things that emerged and created real controversy is, so they have mentioned that there's going to be an allowance for master's degrees and doctoral degrees in an effort to reward people for further study. But what happened to those with bachelor's degrees? And you're in a country where a small percentage of the Guyanese population, last number I heard was 7%, but we've had very low levels of bachelor's degrees in the Guyanese population, much less the public service. So I would think that those with bachelor's degrees should be compensated, and that will be, of course, younger people in the economy. Young people have lower wages as well, and so those are some of the people that should be compensated. Additionally, those with certificates and so on. They've mentioned the ACCA, which is an accountant certificate, but there are a wide range of certificates which help people to be much more efficient at their jobs. Those should be taken into account. The additional measures are just measures that will make a small dent, that is to say, moving people slightly here and there on a salary scale. So not significant measures, really. But it is, as you mentioned, a 3-card trick, because it is a little bit of icing on top of a hollow cake. Even when you look at, I think nurses have duty-free, some duty-free concessions. It's not much concessions, not for many nurses. It's for those who haven't had duty-free before, that kind of language. Which, it's almost as if they're not getting the message. And the message is that those, especially in the healthcare professional, they need to provide competitive wages because people are leaving. And their solution is to train people, and unfortunately people may leave. So proper compensation is necessary, and it is nowhere near this what we're looking at. I mean, if you're going to be spending the equivalent of all of our budgets, and we gave 77%, oh, you're going to come with all good conscience with 10% and a couple of allowances here and there, as if that's something spectacular and noteworthy. I mean, and then on top of that, and this is the funny thing, on top of that, next year 8%. Now, if you had to guess, is next year budget going to be larger or smaller?
Yeah, larger.
And a smaller increase. Man, I don't know what this is.
Yeah. And Elson, you touched on something there, and that is the competitiveness. Now, we have a public service. Public servant workers, the public service is competing with the private sector.
Sure.
Our private sector is no longer the Water Street, Regent Street stores with clerks and so on. We now have a private sector that is linked to the oil industry.
Yeah.
A lot of international companies are coming in and they're paying workers much better. So you're competing with your own private sector. And then you're competing with the Caribbean, where a lot of our workers are leaving to go to and work, our nurses, our teachers, our accountants, etc. They're going to other Caribbean countries because they pay better. Does it not make sense that if you want to attract the best talent to your public service, that you link your wage policy, and I'm going out to policy,
Sure.
not throwing out numbers, but you have a policy about wages. What are you raising wages to achieve?
Yeah.
And one of the things has to be competitiveness. Now, would you not want to raise your wages to bring it on par with what they're paying in the rest of the Caribbean and what your own private sector is paying at home? Would you not want to do that? And can you do that with 6% and 10% and 9%?
Well, David, the president agrees with that general philosophy, but the problem is he says that until 2030, then they're going to be competitive wages in Guyana. That's what they've said. And 2030 is not soon. And by then, the amount of oil Guyana will be producing is very significant, far more oil than we're producing right now. The revenue will be getting every single year. I think it's something like $7 billion per annum of oil revenue. So it is almost as if they're in another world where even when they make arguments, all right, well, this is what we want to accomplish and so on, their reading and understanding of reality is so far away from what could be reasonable that you're scratching your head as to what are these guys talking about? When I tell people that that's what he said, they're like aghast as if, this guy, the government is clueless, absolutely clueless, all the way until 2030 before you have competitive wages in Guyana, a country where multiple years in a row we've had the fastest growth in the entire world, a country where, adjusted for prices, the per capita income is as high or nearly as high as the United States right now. A country which by next year will be producing more oil per capita, exporting more oil per capita than any other country in the world by next year. And you're coming with, give it 6 years? Give it 6 years?
But Elson, in the meantime, you're bringing workers from Bangladesh, from India, from other places. You are not going to bring them here to pay that wages that you are giving your own public servants. So you're telling your own public servants, wait till 2030. But in the meantime, you are bringing in labor from outside of Guyana and paying them what you ought to be paying your own public servants. My brother, you're young, your brain more active than me. Am I crazy? Or are they crazy?
Well, that's it. You look at a government which is taking actions that are just crazy. Just crazy. Even if you look at their previous time in office, if you look at the 2011 to 2014 period, look at the increases they gave then. If they followed the same policy as before, there have been far larger increases, but they're even more stingy than they used to be, which is so bizarre. And again, I think it is not that they have some cohesive and proper reading of the situation or policy. They are making just this calculation. What is the minimum we can get away with? What is the minimum we can get away with? And sadly, that right now is they believe to be 10% and then 8% next year. What we have to tell public servants, what we have to tell the families of those who depend on public servants, what we have to tell public servants who support children in education, who are learning and so on, is that an APNU AFC government, a government which we are involved in, a government in which I am involved, will see you not merely as the bare minimum. We will not see you as the bare minimum. Rather, we're looking to ensure you have a comfortable life. We're looking to work with you so that we have a productive public service as much as we can. And we're looking to ensure that we have a system, a governance system that is on par with those that around the world that are run incredibly well, rather than a system where it's political calculus and calamity and comedy and incompetence 24/7. To close on one note that I think Guyanese need to pay close attention to this cash grant as the checks begin to be rolled out. 300,000 checks supposed to be issued in this particular month, according to the vice president. You're looking at lines when you look at the banking system in Guyana, which is not able to accommodate that. Even some people are saying you can get it wired to you. I went to a particular registration station today, got registered. Of course, the cash grant is my idea and the idea of my party. Of course, I'm going to go and see how
And
it
of
goes.
course, the Working People's Alliance has been pushing it since 2018.
Well, well, this particular 60 billion. But my point is, they're only offering checks. Now,
Yes.
for you to process 300,000 checks through the Guyana system within this 5-month period we're talking about, you're looking at lines that are not 2 hours, 3 hours long. You're looking at lines that are like 3 days long, including 24 hours at the ATM.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like crazy. And you're asking yourself, you mean to tell me that you intended to do this? This is your plan? Who among us could wait for a couple of days in a line? And right now you're already beginning to see long lines at branches as checks start to be distributed. Long lines. Well, this to me looks like it's going to be a disaster. So I want to urge Guyanese to try to be careful about your timing and thoughtful about your timing so that you can get through the system. But it is a bit of a bleak prospect when it comes to collecting, getting this money in your hand. It is unfortunately, and this is just due to PUP's incompetence, as we pointed out. You could have distributed public servants 100,000 with their paycheck this month. You could have given pensioners their money with their paycheck, with their payment this month. That's 150, 140,000 people. Why the need for all of this drama? But the PUP, if they can find the least effective way to do it, that's what they'll do.
And if they can find a way to give you a little small piece, but thief a big piece, and also tie it in to rigging the election because their objective is to stay in power by fair means or foul means. Young Elson Lowe, is always a pleasure to have you on, and please come back quickly. Don't stay away as long as you have stayed away. Thank you very much, my brother.
Happy to chat with you and have a good night.
Thank you. Young Elson Lowe, one of the bright lights in the opposition, and we need to turn it over to young people. And it's good to see our young people who are taking charge as we move closer and closer to taking the reins of government again. As I've been saying, the WPA and the PNC met today at a high-level meeting. The PNC delegation included its leader, Aubrey Norton, its chairman, Sherwin Holder, and its general secretary. And the WPA's delegation included yours truly, Takumo Gunse, Rohit Kanai, the three co-leaders of our party, and Dion Abrams, our chairman. So it was a meeting at the highest level of the parties. And we had a frank discussion. And in the end, we agreed that coalition politics is the way to go, and that the WPA and PNC should open discussion and begin to put in place the building blocks for a coalition to go to the election in 2025. We are leaving the door open for other parties. We agreed that other parties in the opposition, especially the AFC, is needed on board. But we feel that the process cannot wait. Time is running out. And so we began the discussions this morning. We are going to meet again before Christmas to extend the discussion. And then once the holidays are over, we will continue to meet. So we should be able to announce formally the formation of a coalition to go into the next elections. Both parties agreed that it is better, we stand a much better chance of winning the election if we go together. We agreed that our people on the ground want us to go to the election as a coalition. And so therefore, it is about responding to our people, responding to your concerns, responding to your suggestions, that we need a united front as we move into these elections. So, some good news for you here tonight. And as we have been saying, we in the WPA are committed to coalition politics, that we would only go to the election by ourselves as a last resort. Because ultimately, the objective has to be to remove the PPP. As the PNC leader would say, for Guyana to grow, the PNC must go. The PPP, must go. And me and the WPA are saying that although the PPP represents half the population, we have to move them out of the way so that we can begin to put the building blocks for a real national government. Because the PPP is not interested in any national government. They're not. They're not interested in a national government. They're not interested in any unified government. And so therefore, we have to move them out of the way in order to go in that direction. And we want to maximize all of the potential and the energies we have at our disposal. There are going to be people who would say, I am not going to vote for the PNC. That's okay. Then you can give your vote to the WPA. It's all in the same basket. There are people who are going to say maybe the WPA is too radical for them. That's okay. You give your vote to the PNC. And if the AFC comes on board, that broadens the choices. That's the good thing about coalition politics, is that it lessens the number of people who are likely to sit out the election. You know, don't have an excuse to say, I ain't going and vote because them PNC people full of nonsense. You have other choices now. And one of the things that we must do, in fact, the PPP has to do it too, is to bring out our base. As you all know, I frown on this crossover. It will be good to get a seat or two from votes coming from the base that is not our traditional base. If we can get a seat or two from the East Indian community, it will help tremendously. But you have to begin at home. Your charity begins at home. How do we bring out more of our people to the polls? We have to do it all. We have to try to get some votes from the non-traditional base. We have to try to get our share of votes from the Amerindians. But we also have to bring out our base, more of our base. You win elections with your base. Turnout. And we must not give our people an excuse to stay away from the polls. And wash and make and come clean. And we have to aggressively go in that direction. We also agreed that we will intensify our witnessing and our advocacy for biometrics, for a clean voters list, for an impartial GCOM. that we are not leaving it a chance, and we are not taking no as an answer. So we are walking on 2 feet as we must. God gave us 2 feet, and we must walk on 2 feet. We must operate at different levels at the same time. So we operate as the joint opposition parties, in which we advocate for proper election rules, a level playing field. And then we operate at the level of the coalition, where we are going to contest together. We want to make that clear. 2 levels we are operating at. The joint opposition, which at the present includes the PNC, the WPA, and the AFC. And that joint opposition has been meeting, and that the work that we are doing at that level is to ensure that we have a clean voters list, biometrics, and all the other things that we need for a free and fair election. And then the next level, simultaneously, is to build a coalition to contest the election together. A party may decide that it wants to only work together at the level of advocacy for free and fair election. And it may not want to work with us in a coalition to contest the election. That's their right. And the WPA today commit that we are working together at both levels. We're working together at advocating and fighting for a clean voters list, biometrics, and free and fair elections, and that we are working together in building a coalition to contest the election. So that is very, very clear. And so thank you all so much for staying on us and ensuring that we move quickly in that direction. We heard your concerns and we acted on the concern. We have been talking for the last couple of weeks about this meeting. Of course, we couldn't say publicly until we met. But we have been listening to you all, and we have heard your pleas, and we have moved in that direction. We have moved in that direction. Here's hoping that we stay together and that others will join us, because we are at a crossroads in our country. Free elections, fair elections. That is what we have to fight for. And while we are fighting to get those conditions right for free and fair elections, we are preparing for the elections by building a coalition. We discussed today the mistakes that were made in the last coalition. We also discussed the things we got right. And we need to, we agreed to continue the things that we did right. And we agreed to address the things we didn't do right. And so to have an improved coalition as we go forward. For those of you who've been pushing us in the WPA, pushing me as an individual to become more involved, we in the WPA have heard you. We know that we are not a large party in terms of numbers. But as we have been picking up, that we are the second choice. If people had 2 votes, most of the opposition people would choose the WP as their second choice. Think about it. Think about it. And so therefore, we, within our limitations, are prepared to play our role in making sure that we change this government. No longer can our people live on 10% increase. No longer, not in this economy. And we are committed. The first day we take office, we will move our wages and salaries to the level that the private sector in Guyana is paying and to what the public sector is paying in small countries that don't have the resources that we have. That is non-negotiable. That is non-negotiable. We move it there and bring our workers on par. And then we begin with the unions to work out other ways and means of ensuring the security of our workers, of our people. We in the WP are committed to that. All of us were born in poverty. Some of us managed to escape poverty through education, through migration. But we know how rotten poverty is. Shadow said poverty is hell. And so our lifelong, I grew up seeing my auntie working as a maid in some Portuguese people's kitchen. She would come home and she would be full of rage that she had to genuflect to those people. And she made sure that we got an education, as she used to say, so that you are no longer work in nobody's kitchen. Not that working in a kitchen or working as a maid is undignified. There's dignity in all labor. You can work in a kitchen, but you don't have to be in poverty. That's the idea here. It is not the work you do. It is the poverty. And so we are committed to removing the scourge of poverty. It is going to be the primary campaign cry of the WPA. And we hope our partners in the coalition will pick up the cry. Poverty must end. Poverty must go. We can do it. We have the means by which to do it. But our thinking about labor has to change. Public servants are not unproductive laborers. They are productive as any other labor. Their labor is as important as the labor of the sugar worker. Their labor is as important as the bauxite worker. Their labor is as important as our soldiers and our police. All labor is dignified, and we intend philosophically to start from that point, that all labor is dignified, and so all labor deserve to be paid a living wage. And if we achieve nothing else in government, it is to remove poverty from the face of Guyana. And if we remove poverty from the face of Guyana, we do other things automatically, because removal of poverty has a domino effect. Less poverty, more education. More education means more earnings. More earnings means more wealth. More wealth means that you can afford a proper health care. You can afford the best doctors. And so there's a spin-off when we get rid of poverty. Gone will be the days of 10% raise and 9% raise. Gone will be the days. It's not about percentage, it's about a living wage. Because if you go with this percent, by the time you get to a living wage of $300,000, you will achieve that in the next 10 years. And by the time you get there in the next 10 years, that is no longer a living wage. We have to have a living wage now. No. We are not going to be able to do much about the prices in the market. Because that lady that is selling to shell out in the market, she has to live too. And so she has to raise her prices. We understand that. But we have to raise the price for labor, the cost of labor, the price. Because what we are doing, every day we go to work, we are selling our labor power. That's what we are doing. And you are selling your labor for less than you can buy in the market, in the store. That is unconscionable in 2024 in a country that has more bounty than it has ever had before. We are committed. We live ultimately in a world that is run by ideas. There may be ideas that you may not agree with, but you cannot run a country without ideas. The PPP is bereft of ideas. They pull numbers out of thin air. What is the outcome of 10%? Why are you raising wages? Are you raising wages so that people can get more money to go in the market? Then if that is your objective, 10% of $120,000 cannot even begin to scratch the surface. So we want to bring a new leadership philosophy, a new attitude to our people. Across the board raises have to go because they benefit the rich. They benefit those who are earning a lot. We are not saying that those who are earning a lot should not get raises, but it must not be at the same rate of people at the bottom. Equitability means you lift those from the bottom up because they need to get up where the others are. Ultimately, our society must be a society of conscience, a society of equitability. When Christ turned the water into wine and he took that fish and turned it into many other fishes, he divided it equally and equitably. If you're Christians, you understand the principle of equitability. Yes, we are not all born in the same circumstances, but we have to live in the same circumstances. We have to live in the same circumstances. Thank you all very much for staying with us tonight, and I'll be back tomorrow night when we continue our work. Because as they would say, God is not finished with us yet. God is not finished with us yet. The ancestors are not finished with us yet. We have work to do. We have to level the playing field, straighten the crooked roads, and make our country the paradise on earth that we all want to enjoy. Yes, there is going to be milk and honey in heaven, but we've got to get some milk and honey right here so that when we get to heaven, milk and honey would not be something strange to us, will not be something strange to us. We love you. We love you.